At 77 years old, Tony Iommi, the legendary guitarist and riff architect behind Black Sabbath, broke his long-standing silence about his tumultuous, powerful, and unshakably complex relationship with Ozzy Osbourne, and what he revealed stunned fans across the world, not just because of the raw honesty in his words, but because of the decades of mystery, myths, and unspoken truths that surrounded their partnership. Fallouts, brotherhood, and reconciliations, which have been marked by extremes of fame, addiction, creativity, and the kind of psychic bond only forged in the fires of shared musical alchemy and personal collapse. And the moment came during a rare, unfiltered sit-down interview with a British rock journalist named Claire Trenton, whose voice trembled slightly when she introduced the segment as the final truth from the Iron Man himself, a name fitting of Iommi's indestructible career and iconic image. And as cameras rolled in a dimly lit Birmingham studio adorned with vintage Sabbath posters and the warm hum of tube amps in the background, Iommi, dressed in black and sipping tea, leaned forward with a gaze that carried 5 decades of sound and silence and began with the words, "I don't think the world ever really knew what Ozzy meant to me, what he still means to me." And from that moment on, the air changed, as what followed was not just an interview, but a kind of confessional, a peeling back of history's curtain, as Iommi began to speak about the earliest days when they were just teenagers in Aston, to misfits, trying to make noise in a world that didn't listen, and how Ozzy, whose father had to buy a P system to get him into the band, was both an annoyance and a miracle. Someone Iommi couldn't stand and yet couldn't make music without, and he described those early days with clarity and pain, especially the way they survived on crisps and beer, sleeping in vans, arguing over song keys, nearly coming to blows over song lyrics, and yet producing music that would birth heavy metal itself. And Iommi revealed that Ozzy had a sixth sense. For melody he was chaos on legs, but when he opened his mouth it was like something ancient poured out, he said, before detailing how the band's rise brought with it money, temptation, and the kinds of pressures that destroy friendships. And when Trenton asked him about the first split with Ozzy, Iommi paused for almost a minute, tears welling up before saying, "I didn't fire Ozzy, I fired the demon he had become," explaining that by the late 7th South Ozzy's addiction had made him unreliable, violent, and nearly dead, and that the decision, though mutual among the band, haunted him for decades. And what stunned fans even more was Iommi's admission that he would go outside alone after concerts during the years and cry listening to bootleg tapes of his era shows because there was something gone in my soul that only Ozzy filled. The years passed and their relationship seesawed between estrangement and reunion. Iommi said that it was Sharon Osbourne who brokered the peace, not as Ozzy's wife, but as someone who respected the legacy. And he described the emotional moment backstage in 1997 when he and Ozzy hugged for the first time in 15 years, both men weeping in silence, no words needed. And from there Iommi shared stories never told before. The time Ozzy called him at M in 2002 just to sing an old melody from Children of the Grave because he couldn't sleep. Or the time Iommi secretly paid for part of Ozzy's hospital bills during his spinal issues. Or the handwritten note Ozzy gave him after their final show in Birmingham in 2017, which read simply, "You were my right hand, my left arm, and my only brother." And as Iommi pulled out the note, now framed and sitting in his home studio, the camera zoomed in and caught his lips tremble and he whispered, "He never said that in person, but I think he wanted me to know before it was too late." And when asked why he chose now to speak, Iommi said, "Because time's the only thing we can't riff over," hinting at Ozzy's health struggles and the reality of mortality. And what came next shocked fans the most. Iommi confirmed that he and Ozzy had been working secretly on a series of final acoustic Sabbath reinterpretations, recorded between hospital visits and quiet home sessions in Los Angeles and England. Songs stripped of distortion but full of gravity, including an acoustic War Pigs and a blues version of Into the Void, featuring Ozzy singing almost in a whisper, something Iommi called more powerful than any scream he ever gave, and that the project titled Ashes of Iron was meant to be released posthumously. But after seeing the love Ozzy still received from fans, Iommi said they agreed to release it while they're still alive so the world could hear the silence between the notes. And he spoke about their final jam session, a soft, slow version of Planet Caravan with candles and incense burning and Ozzy turning to him mid-song and saying, "We really did it. Tone, we changed the effing planet." And Iommi smiled, saying, "It wasn't ego, it was realization." And as the interview wound down, Iommi addressed the fans directly, saying, "You saw Ozzy the madman. I saw him as my mirror, my burden, and my muse, and he begged the public to remember him not for antics, but for his soul, which he described as fragile, explosive, and eternal. And fans flooded social media with emotional reactions, tributes, and clips, turning the phrase, "We really did it" tone into a viral tag. And music outlets across the globe reported the story as the final Sabbath gospel. And in the days that followed, musicians from Metallica, Slipknot, Tool, and even Elton John posted their own reflections on the Ozzy-Tony bond, while unreleased photos from their early days surfaced, showing two young men not as icons, but as dreamers. And Iommi's truthling opened the floodgates for others to share memories, leading to a worldwide virtual Sabbath tribute organized by fans called Riffer, with over 50,000 guitarists playing Iron Man simultaneously, streamed live with Iommi watching from his home studio, tears in his eyes, whispering Ozzy would love this. And as the music world paused to honor the story, the strange beauty of their bond marked by riffs, rage, ruin, and resurrection became clearer than ever. And Iommi, no longer just the stoic riffmaster, became the keeper of a legacy that was never just about music, but about love forged in distortion. And the silence he broke was not just his own, but the silence of an era that never dared admit how fragile legends can be behind the amplifier.